Our next author, we have Assemblymember Alejo on the queue. Come forward on AB 865. If begin when you're ready.
Listo.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I'm here to present AB 865, but before I begin, I would like to thank the committee staff for their hard work on this bill. AB 865, the Empower California Act, will drive clean energy investments in underserved communities. This bill will require the California Energy Commission to develop an outreach program to inform and increase engagement with women, minority, disabled veteran, and LGBT-owned business enterprises. This means minority-owned businesses will have increased opportunities for job growth and the ability to obtain contracts with major corporations. As a minority-majority state, diversity in business is vital to California's success. The utility companies who have worked with this program for decades have found that it helps build relationships with diverse communities and improve their procurement of the goods and services they need. The Empower California Act will create a more inclusive green economy by encouraging transparency in procurement and leveling the playing field for diverse businesses that may otherwise be overlooked in the clean energy sector. This bill received bipartisan support on the Assembly floor and in Committee on Utilities and Commerce and the Jobs and Economic Development Committee, and it has no opposition. I respectfully ask for an aye vote. And with me today, I have Sakita Grant from the Green Line Institute, who are the private sponsors of this bill, to answer any technical questions you may have.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a few words. Thank you, Assemblymember Alejo. I'm Sakita Grant with the Green Lining Institute. Thank you to the chair and committee members for the opportunity to speak today. I will be very brief, and I'll be available to answer any questions or comments that you may have. AB 865 would set up a program to encourage the Energy Commission and recipients of Energy Commission funding to boost outreach to diverse communities. Specifically diverse businesses owned by women, minorities, disabled veterans, and LGBT individuals. This bill is very carefully drafted. We had the benefit of working with a lot of experts in drafting this bill, including consultants in the Senate as well as the Assembly, and had the pleasure of working with the Energy Commission itself to make sure that the language that is before you today is scoped appropriately and will be effective. The bill language achieves increasing transparency, diversity, and competitiveness within Energy Commission funding, and has been, we've taken care to make sure that this will not end up overly burdening fund recipients or the Energy Commission itself. As I'll close with, as we transition to a new clean energy economy, to support all of California's robust climate goals, it's critically important that we ensure that the diversity of this sector is representative of the rich diversity in California. I therefore respectfully request your support for this bill, and I'm open for any comments or questions.
Do we have anyone else in the public that would like to speak in support of the bill? Please come forward. And then if we can ask the opposition to line up if there's anyone that would like to comment on this bill. Yes.
Afternoon, Senators. Lori Kammerer, Small Business California. Strong support. Thank you.
Mark Herbert with Small Business Majority, also in strong support.
Julian Canetti, California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, in support.
Aziza Goins with the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce, in support.
Very well. I'll note that there's no opposition present. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Great bill. I want to thank you for moving it forward. If you want to make any closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to close, this program is modeled after a similar program for the CPUC, and it's proven effective. Now we're just transitioning this successful program to the Energy Commission. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Okay, very well.
Thank you.
Kevin still presenting this bill?
See? Worked. He's coming up.
We're going to resume our committee. We're going to take up AB 1266.
All right.
Gonzalez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Good afternoon. AB 1266 is an effort to increase transparency and accountability in public utility excess executive compensation. Currently, executive compensations are incorporated into a general rate case. Even when a company has violated federal or state safety regulations where ratepayers shoulder the costs, those same companies can burden ratepayers with excess compensation for their executives without public scrutiny or transparency. This bill will change that. Following a safety violation that cost ratepayers more than $5 million, and prior to seeking excess compensation, a public utility would be required to file a Tier 3 advice letter, and the CPUC would have to hold a public hearing on the compensation request. The CPUC would also determine if ratepayers should shoulder the cost of excessive compensation. I have with me Scott Wetch with the Coalition of California Utility Employees and Mitch Rillo with Local 47 of the IBEW to testify in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman and members, Scott Wetch on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees and the State Association of Electrical Workers. The way the process works today is utilities bury in their general rate case a chunk of money that is targeted for executive compensation. At no time does the PUC in their process evaluate if the bonuses that will be paid out of that chunk of money are warranted, if the performance should warrant that type of compensation. And because it's a 3-year rate case, once the rate case is closed, as we saw with PG&E in San Bruno and where we've seen with Edison and San Onofre, it's too late to go back. And so in the case of the Edison company, the year that they were found by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the California PUC as having been negligent and having caused the premature shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear power station, the same very year that those findings were made and ratepayers were going to be saddled with $3.4 billion, the chairman of the board, Ted Craver, took over $11 million in bonuses the year that they had to shut down songs. The following year, the year that they actually reached the settlement where ratepayers were stuck with the $3.4 billion, he took another $11+ million in bonuses, he took over $15 million in just compensation. All the utilities have to do is, after the fact, after they give the bonuses, they file an annual report at the end of May that just goes to the PUC and sits on a shelf. It doesn't have to be approved. Nothing has to happen. In the last report that was filed for 2014, the chairman, the president of the chairman of the Edison Company, the president of the Edison Company, and just their vice presidents collectively took over $54 million in excess compensation in 1 year. What this bill attempts to do is shed the light on that process. It does not say they can't have bonuses. It just says that in years where they found to have been negligent and have cost ratepayers at least $5 million because of their negligence, that they would have to make a filing to the PUC before they give their bonuses. And the PUC would not have veto power, members. They would not be able to say, you can't have your bonuses. Mr. Craver, you can't have your $11.5 million in bonuses this year. But what they could say is, we don't think the ratepayers should pay for the bonuses this year because you have underperformed. In the current rate case, and Mr. Chairman, this is your ratepayers that are going to be on the hook for this. In the current rate case pending before the PUC for final approval, the Edison Company is asking that ratepayers shoulder 100% of the bonuses over the next 3 years, and that shareholders of the company bear zero. This process would give ratepayers and the public a voice to go in and say, that's not right. We'd urge an aye vote. You can just say you support it. He wasn't.
Yes, IBEW Local 47, Mitch Rollo. We certainly support this. The the waste and the lack of customer care that goes on, and these guys still get monster bonuses is unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also supportive.
Other supporters? Do we have any, okay, you're a supporter, I imagine?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Any opposition on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members, Cindy Hall with Southern California Edison. All IOUs, Southern California Edison included, have the same objective as policymakers, and that is safe, reliable, affordable energy service and delivery. We need to make sure that any rules, regulations, and actions align with these interests and don't create cross-incentives that hinder reaching those objectives. SCE is opposed to AB 1266 as unnecessary, duplicative, and not workable. It duplicates existing public processes related to executive compensation and ignores total compensation as benchmarked against relevant market to ensure that we target market level compensation to ensure we attract and retain qualified employees in all categories. And this extends to the leadership team. AB 1266 ignores due process implications to the extent that there is no requirement for any finding of culpability before a process is triggered to retroactively claw back compensation. If there is a need for additional rules and regulations to hold officers accountable for decisions, this is a questionable way to go about it. The CPUC currently has open investigations and takes actions to the extent it believes there is mismanagement. Routinely, the CPUC can and does disallow recovery of costs or does not allow including costs in rates to the extent they find that there has been a reason to do so. And this bill also ignores that a significant portion of executive compensation is disallowed. Currently, our shareholders invest in the system, the money is advanced by shareholders, and then it is only recovered to the extent the CPUC allows it to be recovered. And for these reasons, Southern California Edison is opposed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have anybody in the committee have any comments or questions? Assembly member, would you like to close?
I'd just like to close by suggesting that this bill is about due process for ratepayers. It's unconscionable to think that on top of paying for inadequacies and safety violations, that the ratepayers are required to shoulder, like we have with songs, that then on top of that, we're being expected to pay for not the base salary, that's not what we're complaining about, but excess compensation in the same year where these safety violations take place. This isn't saying that we can't take into account the market as suggested. It just says that the CPUC can decide that that should be shouldered by shareholders and not ratepayers. This is about transparency. It's about protecting ratepayers, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. And we will ask for a motion as soon as we have a quorum. We're going to move on to our next author, which is Assemblymember Hernandez on AB 853.
Mr. Chair, members, AB 853 prohibits a regulated utility from outsourcing work associated with its nuclear, electrical, and gas infrastructure unless it first obtains the approval of the Public Utilities Commission. As one can imagine, outsourcing critical information technology work can expose our grid systems to customer data and other sensitive information to vulnerabilities. Not a day goes by without reports of another system being hacked. When that information is outsourced, it presents an added source of vulnerability against which we need to protect. Recently, this issue has come to a head with the announcement by Southern California Edison that it is laying off nearly 400 IT workers, with another 100 leaving voluntarily. Southern California Edison has announced it will instead outsource the work to 2 foreign companies. To add insult to injury, there have been allegations that the H-1B visa program has been issued or used to bring workers in to replace
Mr. Chairman and Member Scott Wetch, on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees and the State Association of Electrical Workers, I don't think any rational person would doubt that our critical infrastructure, such as our electric utility grid, our natural gas pipelines, and our nuclear power plants are some of the most sensitive pieces of infrastructure in need of protection from terrorist attack. Just last year, as you know, Mr. Chairman, PG&E substation was the subject of attack that was the subject of several hearings in your committee. Consequently, investor-owned utilities that are granted the exclusive license to operate these facilities by the state of California must not be allowed to offshore critical jobs that might jeopardize the safety, security, or reliability of these sensitive pieces of infrastructure. About 10 months ago, Southern California Edison told more than 500 of their workers at their IT facility in Irvine, California, that they were all going to be replaced and that they were all going to be outsourced. To add insult to injury, those employees were told if they didn't agree to what's called knowledge transfer, meaning if they didn't agree to train the very people that were coming to the United States to take their jobs, they would be fired with cause, they would be prevented from getting a severance package, and they would be unable to collect unemployment insurance. So basically they were told, you're going to train your replacement or you're going to get nothing. Then they were asked and required to sign a non-disclosure agreement that says that they wouldn't tell the press, this legislature, or anybody about the terms of their dismissal. As a result, the Southern California Edison Company has come under scrutiny and has been accused of violating the H-1B visa process by such leaders as Darrell Issa and the chair of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Frank Grassley of Iowa. Unfortunately, the Edison Company chose to invoke their Fifth Amendment right and not appear before the U.S. Senate committee looking into this. But through that testimony from many people who stepped forward, we learned of the what I would term as despicable process that they use to replace these workers. In response to that, what the Assemblymember's bill attempts to do is not say you can't do outsourcing or you can't spend ratepayer money on outsourcing. It merely says that prior to doing that, you need to go to the PUC and demonstrate to the PUC that replacing that particular workforce will not threaten the safety, security, or reliability of the natural gas, nuclear, or electrical infrastructure. Remember, members, Southern California Edison operates the second largest grid of the United States. So we just want to make sure that all the bases are covered and that there's a public process to ensure that some critical jobs, like these technology jobs, are not sent to countries that are known homes of terrorists that could jeopardize our key infrastructure in California. So we would urge an aye vote.
Yes, I'm Mitch Rollo with IBW Local 47. We do represent the workers at Southern California Edison, but we do not represent these IT folks. We just run into them as the course of doing business. I've got the opportunity to speak with a lot of those folks down there. They're a diverse crowd of people that are very highly intelligent. They can't come here and speak to you, but they've asked me to do that. They are having a hard time finding jobs. They're having a hard time taking care of their families. They're having a hard time paying their Southern California Edison bills, where Edison gets to jack the money out of them but terminates them. So that's the person issue of those folks, Americans that deserve jobs. How they affect our members and how this affects the customers out there very, very immediately is our troubleman, for example. You have a car hit pole. You've got those circuits down on the ground. We're making glass, what we call when we hit the sand. So we've got our emergency personnel there. We've got our police there. And our computer goes down. Those computers, all of our circuits are on those computers. So what breaker we need to communicate, or we need to open them or close them, they're 30, 40 miles away, or we got to make parallels where we have to open up to get the customer's power back on and be able to safely help the people get away from those vehicles. We're talking to somebody in India and watching the little hourglass circle around like this. It's just disheartening to the members out there that they're being told that they can't do their jobs right and correctly and safely because we have to talk to somebody in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Jeremy Smith again here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also in support.
Other supporters?
Thank you.
Yes.
If there are any other supporters, come forward at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, also in support.
Do we have opponents? Any opposition to this bill?
Mr. Chair, members, Cindy Howe with Southern California Edison here in opposition to AB 853. First, I'd like to correct the record with regard to a few inaccurate statements by Mr. Wetch. There was no subpoena for Southern California Edison to appear at any hearing in Washington, D.C. We respectfully declined an invitation by the committee. There was no Fifth Amendment right that was invoked. Second, the employees, Southern California Edison is going through a tremendous transition. As all of you know, there's tremendous transition in this industry, and we are forced to make very, very difficult decisions in order to make sure that the utility that employs 13,000 hardworking individuals in Southern California and has been around for over 128 years can continue to be around for the next 100 years. So we're making these tough decisions. None of it's easy. And the employees that were laid off were not asked to train their replacements. We have contracted with managed service companies with a skilled workforce. There are, however, Edison-specific processes and software that needed to be communicated. So with that, I'd like to go into our opposition for 853, which sets a very, very challenging policy for utilities to implement, in that anytime we would contract out for work, we would be required to go through a public process at the CPUC and get a written decision to do so. We have thousands of contract workers. A lot of those are union jobs. A lot of them are with diverse businesses that is in support of policies adopted by this legislature and the Public Utilities Commission. We have over 700 contracts with diverse businesses throughout our service territory and throughout a range of roles and with a range of responsibilities. All of those contracts would have to go through this process, and it is these processes, these hearings and decisions can take months, if not years, to go through. So with regard to our opposition to the bill, again, my earlier statement, I think utilities are on the same page with policymakers. I mean, our interests are safe, reliable, affordable. And quite frankly, to the extent there are barriers created, as 853 does, in our ability to use contract workers to accomplish that work, it jeopardizes that. So I think with that, I would just ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may have my witness respond to the statement.
You'll have your chance. I just want to get through the opposition's comments.
I will keep my comments brief. Andrea DeVoe for TechNet. We are opposed to AB 853. It creates excessive, unnecessary burdens on utilities, even for the most simplest of contracts. We do not think it's the right approach, and respectfully must ask for your no vote.
Mr. Chair, Chris McKaylee on behalf of the Computing Technology Industry Association, and we share the concerns expressed by TechNet. Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition to this bill? Anybody from the committee want to make any comments, or Ms. Niemela?
Erin Niemela, representing Large Scale Solar. We also would like to associate our remarks with TechNet. Thank you.
Okay, very well. There are no comments or questions from the committee. Did you want to close? You might want to respond to their comments.
Yeah. Mr. Chair and members, in response to the supposition that somehow this bill is going to have a dramatic impact on rudimentary, everyday contracting out. First of all, there's a section in the bill that clearly exempts contracting out for construction work, and that's the vast amount of contracting out that a regulated utility does. That's probably 90% of it.
Well, these are closing comments now, so we'd like the author to make the closing comments.
Okay.
Possible, please.
Mr. Chair, yeah, with regards to some of the comments made by the opposition, if you'll allow about a minute for my expert witness to respond.
Your closing comments now. If you don't want to address them, that's okay, but if you just want to close, that'll be fine.
I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Just simply, my comments on this bill, I think this is a great bill looking out for not only our ratepayers, but jobs in California. I think I just want to ask the author. We did propose some amendments, and I just want to make sure that you're okay with the amendments.
I'll be taking them up in the next committee.
Okay, very good. So that's a yes, and I think that gets to some of the arguments that this requirement is onerous. I think when they do take up issues before the PUC, they can all get ironed out there, and this will create a scenario in which they need to address the practices with regards internally in hiring. So I want to encourage support for this measure. It's a good bill. I want to thank the author. And I think the presentation was thorough, and I think it raised all the concerns, and I think generally we're privy to them. And I think overall this is a good bill in defense of jobs. So when we have a quorum, we will move this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.